Business Unusual, separating economic facts from fiction.
Good evening, I'm Andy Hodges. Welcome to ZFM Stereo's premier business show, Business Unusual, a show where we discuss everything to do with business, finance and economics. Tonight we're discussing the state of the country's postal and telecommunications sector, and we're privileged to have with us as our guest tonight Ozias Bvute. He is the chairman of the Postal and Telecommunications Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, POTRAZ, and of course a Zimbabwean engineer. Ozias, welcome to the show.
Andy, thank you very much for having me.
Now, Ozias, before we kick off into our main thing, last night, I'm not sure you're aware, but last night a service operator went down for quite a number of hours, particularly in my area, and I'm not sure if it was countrywide, but we went out and we took a little bit of a sample of what the people were saying. So maybe you listen to this.
Okay.
There was no business at all. It's fine to have another network system to improve the country, whatever, sales, business.
ndakazotraira nhamba kuti tione yaramba but yaishiwa mabhazi enetwork
nezuro network yakativhiringidza basa redu takuende kumba tichida kutenge zvinhu zvekuti tidye kumba nemhuri takatadza because of network. Saka network yavo ngavaimprove, kana vasiri kuzvigona ngavapewo, ngavaite kuti kuvhurwe ma network systems zvitibatsire.
I'm in the fuel industry. Yesterday we had a problem for about 5 hours. I basically operated a 24-hour business. It affected my sales very much. I lost 3/4 of my sales. This was a very big challenge in terms of there was no communication to us as a business. You know, it was a challenge as well because we have customers coming back from yesterday that actually did transactions that only processed yesterday after the system was working as well. My question is, are we going to have the same problems in future without communication?
Benzama ukuthi ngilokhu ngifaka ama transactions ama customer debetenga kuye kungala network siluza ama customers amaningi ahambile izolo service ipoor ibiphuwa kwezolo akuhambanga kuhle sibili business lethu libe low ngokuthi thina so izolo nomuntu aliyazama ukuthi lenze something ukuthi kube right.
Well, there you have it, Ozias. That's the complaints from the street. So, you know, I have to ask the question that one of the people said there: are we going to see this happening? And you know, networks going down for 5 hours and really no one being told what's going on.
Well, let me start by saying that it's very, very unfortunate that a network went down for 5 hours. I can understand the pain and trepidation of the various consumers who were speaking on the clips that you've presented. I can't speak on behalf of the individual operators, but certainly from a POTRAZ perspective, we aim to ensure that the quality of service that our operators provide is of the highest standard. You'll appreciate that with issues technology, sometimes glitches occur and things go very, very wrong. We'll continue to engage our operators to ensure that there's sufficient backup to ensure that that doesn't happen. Sometimes, as you know, it requires a significant investment, and at times they are not quite in a position to do that of which is required based on the volume of traffic that has developed over time. But we'll continue to engage them, and as is our mandate, we'll ensure that where they don't comply, we fine them. And I think we've done that in the past. It's unfortunate, but let's see how we can work with them to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Right, because it's important that, you know, telecommunications, particularly network service, is vital. You know, in any situation, in any country, there must be a plan B or a backup plan if some of these things go wrong. And I assume that's what you mean about talking to the telecom operators and so forth.
You know, most things are server-based, and there's always an expectation that you'll have a backup service in the event that things go horribly wrong. I'm not too sure what went wrong yesterday, but as is the cry of those people, it went horribly wrong. And we'll try by all means to ensure that we encourage them to ensure that their backup service goes up within a reasonable period of time. let's see what we can do.
Okay. Now, I know POTRAZ, for example, I think it was with another service operator where you instructed them to refund their clients for lost bundles and so forth. I mean, is this a similar situation where people may have lost their bundles during the course of those 5 hours and so on? How does it actually work, that process?
Well, I think what will happen is that the regulator will investigate and see what went wrong. If the issue was merely because of negligence, then the regulator will find the operator and will try and ensure that the consumers get some form of recourse. There's always an engagement process.
Yes.
I think what we've tried to do with POTRAZ is we've tried to ensure that we minimize the fights between us and the operators in our sector. We must always try and talk. I think dialogue is the best way of ensuring that we move forward. Sometimes they also genuinely have constraints that don't allow them to operate at their optimum, which are beyond their control. So ours is to balance out that equation and say, okay, that of which is in your control, please ensure that you are doing the best that you can so that the consumer doesn't suffer.
Right. So because POTRAZ's role really is to make sure the consumer is also safeguarded in terms of their product.
We're a regulator, and what we're there to do is to ensure that you operate within a specific framework that of which the law has provided for, and that both parties are not affected.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Now, please, listeners, feel free to get in touch with us on phone number 0772 168 045 or WhatsApp 0733 168 045 or our various social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. Now, there is one thing that I think that everybody must applaud your board as well as the Minister of ICT and Cybersecurity, Supermandi Wanziwa, and that was the recent launch of the Innovation Fund, which I think was launched in March last year. Now, maybe you could explain to us, what is the fund all about and what are its objectives?
I think first and foremost, I must give credit to the minister. It was his brainchild. And he asked that POTRAZ, through the Universal Services Fund, run with it till it bears fruition. And what we are basically saying is that we would like to encourage local innovation. And there are so many people with ideas within the ICT sector who would like to develop them, but just don't have the capital to do it. So essentially we are saying, you have a good idea. Bring that good idea to us. If we think it's a bankable idea, we'll fund it. And we'll fund it to a point where it becomes a viable business. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. I think you will be aware that we launched the fund a few weeks ago, and His Excellency President Mnangagwa was gracious enough to officiate that function. And 6 startups, Ozias, Purple Science, Shift Technologies, Red Pen, AfriMom and Native Project were given funding. And our idea is to monitor that funding in stages, so you will have milestones that you must achieve. As you achieve that milestone, we'll continue to release funding up until your project becomes something that is viable. You will be aware, Andy, when you look at apps, just the basic app on the phone. For example, WhatsApp, we all significantly rely on WhatsApp.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
And WhatsApp is an application that someone developed. And we're saying, if we have young people with the ability to develop applications that are local compliant, that will assist within the environment that we live in, come, let's try and fund you. Let's develop things that allow us to not only buy, but sell. Because we're all consumers of WhatsApp. And every single one of us, there's a fee that we pay to WhatsApp. So if we can get a local entrepreneur, a local innovator to develop something that he can sell globally, and they simply get $1 from it, from as many individuals as they possibly can. Imagine the business sense that is developed through that. And that's the idea with the innovation drive, to develop Zimbabweans to a point where they can sell globally. Let's bring back Forex rather than send it out.
Right. I mean, the minister himself, ICT and Cybersecurity Minister, Supermandi Wanziwa, he said, the fund is going to make their dreams come true.
Absolutely.
The young people here have been looking for people who walk the talk. There is nothing special about the kids of Silicon Valley. We can do the same and better.
Absolutely. And we had a slight symposium at the launch where our young people showcased what they can do. And you'll be amazed what people are doing in there, what our young people are doing in their homes. And we're saying, here's a platform. Take advantage of it. We're going to develop you. We're going to help you to be great. And given the number of applications that we've received to date, there's been an overwhelming response or a desire by our people to try and make sure that they qualify for us to fund them. We're committed to it.
I mean, you had 188 innovators who
in
applied, and I mean, of those 6 made it.
Yes.
I mean, so that shows that there are people out there who have these ideas, and they just need, as you said, the capital and the avenue, I suppose, to explore.
Absolutely. And what we're saying is, for those that did not make it on the first round of funding, we're not saying the door is closed. We're saying we're going to work with you, and we're going to help you get to a point where your project is bankable and we can actually fund it. And one of the young innovators, Shift Organics, if I remember, actually won an award in South Korea.
Wow.
Yes, they were cognizant of the fact that whatever technology he had developed was significant.
Right.
And you'll be amazed at how many people have potential sitting out there that just want a chance.
I mean, that's what I say.
And we're going to give them that chance.
I think this fund is an excellent thing. I mean, but it isn't just about funding these innovators. I mean, the objectives of the fund are quite wide, aren't they?
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe you could take us through those.
Well, we can be very technical. To increase ICT research and development by young innovators and research institutions, to increase the total number of homegrown ICT applications and create employment,
which
very
is
important.
vital and very
create
important.
employment, to promote a culture of ICT innovation and development among Zimbabwean youth, to establish innovation hubs, incubation centers within the country. These are places where young people can actually go, get high-speed internet, use computers that are of the highest standard, and do what they need to do without constraint. To provide business and technopreneurial training and incubation services to young innovators within the country.
Right. I mean, those are incredible. But obviously, this is funding, right? So, so POTRAZ or the ministry has said what? Providers must put in some form of fee or percentage of their revenue. How does that work? What sort of percentage?
We take a small percentage of the total revenue that our telco operators generate, and this was in conjunction and collaboration with them, and this is set aside and put in the innovation fund. So every time you make a call, there's a small percentage that's actually going into this innovation fund to try and ensure that our young people have the ability to create ICT software applications, ICT hardware, applications for postal and courier services, intellectual property registration for approved ICT innovations, and more importantly, telecommunications-based applications.
Right. Those are sort of the innovation areas that the fund is looking at.
Yes.
And I assume, of course, because it's just been launched, it takes a while to get traction, to build up the necessary capital inside it and so forth, to then eventually put all your plans in motion.
Yes, it does. But I think we've been building the fund over the last year. There's a significant amount that is in the fund right now that is ready for deployment, and subject to the applicants being able to meet our criteria, we are ready to actually assist and help them go the extra mile to ensure they go where they need to go to.
Perfect. Now, at that launch, I think President Emerson Mnangagwa, he said he wanted technology developments to move the country from consumptive technology to productive and transformative technology.
Yes.
Now, how, what do you think he meant by that in terms of the fund, in terms of its mission?
Well, I think what he was essentially saying is that we're a consumer-based society that tends to draw from others. And we're saying, let's develop things that we can sell outward. Because I think the cry for Zimbabwe has been, we don't have enough foreign currency. But our intellectual capital is such that we can develop things that we sell to other people, and I think that's essentially what he was driving at. And when you look at some of the countries that we would like to benchmark against, or countries that have developed in the last 20 to 30 years, if you look at Malaysia, if you look at Singapore, if you look at one of the Koreas, you'll actually discover that their transformation has been as a result of their ability to innovate. And what is to innovate? To come up with ideas and develop them to a point where they're commercially viable. And that's what they've done. Every single one of us has either an iPhone or a Samsung phone.
Nice.
And essentially someone sat and said, this is what I want to do, and they got it to a point where it works. And I think here in Zimbabwe, we have that ability. Right. We have people with the ability to develop applications, to develop things and get them to work.
I think you're so right. I mean, I think a lot of countries believe that overseas or in different countries they're better or they can do better. But actually, we have the talent, we have the brains, we have the will and the people to do it here.
Absolutely. you'll be amazed at the diasporan Zimbabweans who work in the most amazing institutions out there.
Right.
Not long ago, I was with the minister, and he received a call from a very proud parent who said, my daughter works for Facebook. She's going to be in Zimbabwe. Would it be possible for her to meet with you so that she shares some ideas? And so how many people do we know who are Zimbabwean who work for the most amazing organizations in the world? How did they get there? It all started here in Zimbabwe, which means that the root is here. What you need to do is to facilitate for that root to grow. And the Universal Services Fund would like to do that.
Okay, well, we'll carry on about the fund, but let me take a WhatsApp question here. My question to the POTRAZ gentleman is based on a recent MNO that approached Zim in February. But POTRAZ gave the position that we are not ready to have another MNO because of lack of infrastructure. I want to ask that shouldn't it be the case that we should actually be looking for an MNO with the capacity to construct their own infrastructure and add on to what we have? In other words, instead of dismissing the potential, we open our doors to the ones with capacity and give the consumers more options and variety.
I think the president has been unequivocal. Zimbabwe is open for business. And POTRAZ has taken that stance as well. If you come up with a reasonable proposal and you seek for us to license you, we'll license you. Show the ability, show the capacity, show us what you want to do. We are not going to sit on the ability of individuals or entities to provide services that our people need.
Right.
We are ready to receive them.
And of course, when you've done your appraisal of these companies, there's all sorts of issues you look at. It isn't just one issue and say, well, we're going to reject you for that. You obviously have to do a proper analysis to see whether it's good for the country and good for the industry.
And you'll appreciate that there's been a marked increase in all issues business in Zimbabwe over the last 3 or 4 months. And on the back of that, we are saying, come, let's talk. Apply. If it makes sense and you are in a position to roll it out, we'll do it. For example, there was an entity that spoke to us that says, look, we want to help with your fiber backbone. Would you allow us to come and invest in that? Absolutely.
Yes, why not?
The world is going fiber. If you have the money, you have the ability, you want to bring your fiber, bring it to Zimbabwe. We are ready to accept you.
All right, well, please, listeners, feel free to get in touch. You have the chairman of POTRAZ here, so please ask him your questions. You can WhatsApp us on 0733 168 045 or on our various social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. Now, getting back to the fund. Now, this is a very important question because you obviously are giving out money, which I suppose is hard-earned money, or if I can call it government money or our money, so to speak, right?
It's your money.
How are you monitoring these? How would you monitor them? Because that's an important part of the process of the fund, is to make sure that the people you give the money to are performing adequately based on what was agreed.
Well, the first thing is we enter into a contract. The contract gives milestones, things that you need to do that enable us to fund you at various stages. And on the back of that, there's a very competent committee that actually oversees that process on a day-to-day basis. If you look at the governance around POTRAZ, it's I think it's second to none. We're one of the only parastatals that has had an annual general meeting and have presented our books of accounts to say this is where we are and this is what we're doing. So from a governance perspective, you can't doubt that we have the ability to actually ensure that the right things are done.
Now, it's all well and good, I suppose, finding innovators or finding products that they can produce or sell out, and then obviously, but they need to then get into business, I suppose. I mean, it's the next stage, isn't it? The stage of like, we have the product, it's a great one, it's innovative, but now how do we monetize it?
Well, what we've done is there's a position at POTRAZ which is head of innovation, someone who actually runs this fund, and part of the work that they should do is to actually ensure that the entire value chain is encompassed in everything that we're doing. From start to finish, we must be able to help our innovators get to a point where they're commercially viable. We must link them up with our telcos. We must link them up with our courier service providers. We must link them up with business. And what we've done is in the last year or so, we've taken 3 or 4 of them across and about all over the world. We've showcased them. We've said, there's an exhibition here. Come, let's go with you. Let's see the world.
Oh, hang on. You've taken innovators with you on some of your trips to show them what's going on.
And we've gotten them to showcase what they've done. And as I said, one of them, Shift Technologies, actually received an award in Korea based on the fact that we said, come, let's go. We're going to go with you. Go and show the world what you have.
Right.
And it's only when people begin to be enlightened and they see new things, they're exposed to new things, they interact with others of a similar disposition, that they begin to grow. The more you have the ability to absorb, the more you have the ability to actually give out. And we're trying to create a platform for that.
Okay, now, of course, people will ask, well, again, people, government and POTRAZ giving out money and so forth for the benefit of just a few companies and so on. But this has a deeper socio-economic development program and an impact on our country. Maybe you can tell us, how you see that happening.
Absolutely. Earlier on I spoke about our common use product, which is WhatsApp. If you look at WhatsApp, I think a local company has actually come up with an equivalent of WhatsApp. Our current WhatsApp requires that we subscribe, and there's a fee that we pay. Now, if you take 15 million Zimbabweans who are all subscribing for $1 at the same time, they've essentially paid $15 million out of Zimbabwe.
Right.
And we're saying, okay, let's change that dynamic. Let's try and internalize it such that the first market becomes our local consumers. The second market becomes your ability to sell to others, such that you now begin to have this process where you are drawing money into Zimbabwe than out of Zimbabwe. You create employment. Outside of creating employment, all things technology have started with an idea. It's literally an idea that sparks in someone's mind, and it's either they're encouraged or they encourage themselves. And we are saying, we want to encourage you. Do you have an idea? Do you feel it will go somewhere? We want to believe in you. By believing in you, we'll fund it. But it must meet a basic criterion. And I think we'll create jobs. I think we'll create local businesses that will actually grow over time. And I think my minister was right when he says, we have the ability to create our own little Silicon Valley here. And how many people does it take? 3, 4, 500, 200,000 people with the ability to do. It'll change the country. And it's just a matter of time.
And you're right. It's about ideas. You're so correct. And at least this is an avenue. This fund is an avenue for people with ideas, particularly ICT-based ones, to approach and to get the funding for it. I mean, and to make it. That's why I say it's an excellent initiative. So I congratulate you and the minister on that one. Now, the current status of the fund. What is the current status of the fund?
Well, the fund is populated. It has X millions in it, ready for use by applicants who meet our criteria. As I said, 6 companies have actually met that criterion and are ready to be funded. And through CBZ Bank, we will now begin the process of ensuring that they get the funds to do the things that we've agreed that they're going to do. And I hope that in the next few months, we'll begin to publicize more of what the fund is about and what it's going to do. We'll also showcase the success stories around it. And more importantly, those 182 people or entities that applied in the first round that were not able to meet our criterion, we'll try and help them get to a point where they actually access funding from ourselves. What we'd like to do is to create a revolution. Essentially, we would like to create a technological revolution that is driven by Zimbabweans. So at all our major post offices, if you look at Harare Central Post Office, by virtue of where technology is right now, the post office is no longer what it used to be in the past.
No, not at all. I don't know if
it's a white elephant.
I don't know if I posted the letter, if I don't know how long I haven't posted the letter.
You see? So we'd like to create innovation hubs at these post offices. I think if we look at the first floor of Harare Post Office, we want that to be an innovation hub, an incubation center. If you go to Mutare has a beautiful post office that is in the center of town that is no longer doing what it was intended to do, but we can certainly say, people, come and use it. High-speed internet, high-speed computers, laboratories that allow for you to explore and to do. That's what we want to develop. And we're going to roll that out in the next year. That's our plan. That's our vision. And honestly, we're committed to that.
Yeah, well, I've always said ICT is the backbone of any economy, and this is obviously a good way of corralling our citizens with ideas and to become part of that revolution.
Absolutely, and we're committed to that. We're very excited about it. When the idea was first mooted and sold to us, we said, okay. Then we actually all began to absorb it, and we got to a point where we now understand it. And I think it will change Zimbabwe. But with all things that you sow, it'll take time before it actually becomes a fire. And when it then becomes a fire, we'll look back and say, this is how it started.
That's where we started.
And we're confident we're going to get there. Absolutely.
Now you've just done the first call. As you said, 6 companies managed to meet the criteria.
Yes.
And I understand that you're making a second call for proposals sometime, is it this week or next week?
Yes, in a week or two we'll make a second call. The general idea is that we haven't created enough publicity around it post the launch, and we're now going to get to a point where we're going to publicize it a bit more. We're going to educate people on what we're trying to do, and we're going to go into the schools and the universities and say, look, you can do this. And I think after a while, it's our hope and wish that it'll gather momentum to a point where everybody who feels they have a spark can actually say, the innovation fund is where I must go.
100%.
It must be at the top of your lips.
Now, and I mean, unlike the first call, of course, which had a window period, this doesn't now, correct?
No. It's now, this fund has been established, it's there at law, it will be there for time immemorial, and it will be an ongoing thing. And whether, if you conceptualize, you get to a point where you've conceived, approach them. They'll be ready to assist you and to help you make it happen.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Now, interestingly enough, this innovation fund ties hand in hand with the National Information Communication Technology Policy, the ICT policy, correct?
Which is a Ministry of ICT policy.
It's a Ministry of ICT policy. No, not a POTRAZ one. However,
yes.
Though, I think the linkage in between it, because if I can quote the minister again,
Yes.
he says, this policy will undoubtedly provide strategic direction and guidance for sustainable national economic development through systematic and coordinated applications of ICTs.
Absolutely.
So in a way, I suppose POTRAZ's role is to complement the policies of government.
Absolutely.
And so how do you think that you can sort of meld the ICT policy together with POTRAZ's own mandate and its own mission statement?
Well, I think that when you look at the two, primarily we derive our mandate from government. Government has given a clear direction in terms of where it wants us to go. And our job and responsibility is to ensure that we make that happen. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Because, as you said, things go hand in hand. I mean, you're talking here about ICT backbone infrastructure, ICT education, research, and so on. And I mean, POTRAZ, of course, is there. But all of these initiatives, it obviously means that the regulatory environment is changing quite substantially. I mean, you were established in 2001, where it was a very different type of landscape to today.
Yes.
And obviously, regulatory issues are becoming more and more complicated. Do you find that you have to constantly be on top of this to keep a handle on it?
I think one of the most amazing things about POTRAZ is that through the ITU is that our staff go on various study tours and are involved in study groups where they're continuously exposed to where the world is going and what the world is doing. And I think we've been able to keep abreast of that. What we'd like to do moving forward is that the speed at which technology is moving has gotten to a point where we're trying to create collaborative partnerships with other regulators around the world. I know, for example, this coming month, our team is going to be going to India through the invitation of the Indian government for us to be able to interact with the regulator in India. And you can imagine India is such a dynamic market.
Oh yeah, 1.2 billion people.
1.2 billion. You can imagine the number of people who use cell phones and the laws that they have had to put in place in order to regulate such a massive sphere. And through that engagement, I think it also enables and enlightens our staff to be able to do the work that they should do in Zimbabwe.
Let me take another question, because it's about WhatsApp, because it's quite interesting. They find that WhatsApp is good for calling is virtually non-existent. You can message and so forth, but when you try and call on WhatsApp, you can't get through. Now, I'm not sure if that's a POTRAZ question, but I think it's definitely an issue of subscribers.
Well, I think what I should have done is I should have brought Brian Mutandiro from Net1. I should have brought Angeline Vera from Telesal, and I should have brought Douglas Boyne from Econet to say, ladies and gentlemen, your customers want answers from you. I can't quite answer as to why WhatsApp would not work in various localities. But what I can say is that the various networks have been upgrading their infrastructure over time. So you'll find that in certain instances, they may have technologies that are 3, 4, 5 years behind, and you'll see that in the CBD, for example, everybody's virtually on LTE, which is probably the most latest technology that is available to us, pre-5G. So it's really an issue of what the network is using and what technologies they have, and what investment they've put in their network to enable you to be able to use it. I know, for example, where I live, even though I'm the chairman of the regulator, my 3 phones don't always work as well as they do. And when I've asked one of the operators, why doesn't my phone work? I'm the regulator. They've said to me, it's an issue of investment, Chairman. We need to invest a bit more. Right. And I think with any business, it's what you put in it.
All right. Well, we'll take a break now, but please join us after the break. We have Ozias Bvute. He's the chairman of the Postal and Telecommunications Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, POTRAZ. So join us after the break.
What's up? Z. We're on top of the world, playing nothing but top hits. Blowing it up.
Every time I do it, I do it proper.
If it's too loud, you're too old. Z.
Why don't you give me more? Stand what would you love me?
Zimbabwe's finest radio. Your hit music station. Z.
Number 1 hit music station. Holy water. When this fire.
CFM Stereo. Z.
Business Unusual, separating economic facts from fiction.
Welcome back to Business Unusual. With me is a very special guest, Ozias Bvute of POTRAZ. He's the chairman of the board, and it's one of the few times, actually, I believe that he actually has interviews on radio. So take this opportunity, please, to contact us on WhatsApp 0733 168 045, and this will be your chance to ask him a few questions. Let's take a couple of questions. This is from Jakilo. It is commonly viewed that POTRAZ treats Econet differently to the other government-linked operators. For example, the operator's license issue. Others were given favorable payment terms as opposed to Econet. Do you have a comment on that?
I think that there's a misconception, and that misconception must be put to bed. We treat all our operators fairly, regardless of whether they're in the government stable or not. I think one of the things that we did, and I think Douglas Mboweni will bear testimony to this, is that when I became chairman, I had a meeting with him and I said, I would like us to work together for the common good. At the time, there were various matters pending litigation where they probably felt that they hadn't been treated fairly. And I think over time, through discussion, we've been able to solve them. The general idea is for us to provide a level playing field that enables the general Zimbabwean to be able to use services that our providers provide.
Right.
And I think that if you look at the growth of Econet, if we had impeded their growth, they would not be what they are today. So at some stage, there has to be a belief that we have allowed growth and competition to occur to a point where there's one dominant player. And that hasn't been because we've been holding them back or we've tried to constrain or restrain them. In the past, there may have been squabbles that the regulator or other entities may have had with them. But during my tenure, I'd like to bear testimony that we've had very, very few misunderstandings and we've always been able to solve them. The specific issue that has been raised is that the regulator is allowed to allow for terms of payment through negotiation. At the time that occurred, I was not chairman, So I cannot speak on the terms that were agreed upon. And whatever terms were agreed upon are the basis of whatever occurred. But our general expectation is that we want our telcos to grow. We would like to provide a platform that allows for legislation that allows them to do well. After all, what better testimony than successful Zimbabwean businesses that we regulate? The more they do well, the more POTRAZ does well, and the more POTRAZ has the ability to reinvest in other areas through the use of the devices that we use to levy.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, POTRAZ is the regulator.
Yes.
Business is business.
Business is
so
business.
how business operates and what it does and whether one's a dominant player or not is really none of your kind of...
Absolutely.
As long as they stick to the law.
To the law.
They make sure that their tariffs and so forth are acceptable and competitive, and they don't
Yes.
and they don't sort of become a monopoly. Because I think that's the danger, isn't it?
And
of
a
someone becoming too big.
regulator is like a headmaster. You won't always agree with what the headmaster does. But the general expectation is that the headmaster would like you to leave his school with an education of sorts at the end of the tenure. And our general expectation is that we would like our telcos and all the entities that we regulate to do well.
Yeah, I mean,
and we want to facilitate
it's
that.
a given, yes, of course. And you must put in the regulatory environment.
But we want them to act responsibly in their pursuit of that.
Exactly.
And how do we do that? We want them to be able to charge reasonably. We want them to be able to provide a service that does not rip off people, and we want their technologies to be such that they enhance and they don't impede. Like you asked when I came in that there was an outage, and we're saying, no, we don't want outages, we want service. How can you ensure that you provide that service?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the regulator does.
Absolutely.
You don't want outages every day, 3-4 hours. I mean, that's just not acceptable.
The terms of the license, every license has terms and conditions that apply to it, and ours is to ensure that the terms and conditions that have been agreed to are adhered to, period.
Right. Now, you mentioned fees and charges and so forth by the operators. And I think there's a question that we have here from Felix. Thank you, Felix. Why are the licensing fees so high for mobile network operators? These companies are now punishing us with exorbitant prices. And I mean, it gets to the point that our charges, we looked at a survey of the regional Southern Africa, for example, they're reasonably high compared to other countries in the region. I mean, so those two questions in terms of the fees that they actually pay, as well as the charges that they then pass on to customers.
I think that you'll all appreciate that the telecommunications sector is probably one of the most profitable sectors in any economy globally, number one. So when you pay for a license fee, you are paying for the expectation of the revenue that you're going to make. If you have the capacity to match your ability to do and to receive that revenue, the license fee becomes an insignificant figure, because we're essentially saying to you, go and do. And if you go and do well, it's a license for you to make lots of money.
Right.
So the figure that we levy them becomes an insignificant figure vis-a-vis what they have the potential to do. When we look at fees per se, and we look at the cost of calls, there's a study that has been done. It's called Lyric, where we compare the general regional trends and the global trends of what everybody else is charging, and we try and benchmark that to what is reasonable. The regulator will always try and steer to the point of ensuring that the winner is actually the consumer. Where we may have a difficulty with is the cost of data, because we are saying to ourselves, data in Zimbabwe is very high. It shouldn't be as high as it should be. And we're actually in discussion with the operators to say, no. How can we get to a point where this amount that people pay is benchmarked within what everybody else does? For example, it's cheaper to use internet in Zambia and in Malawi, and they're all landlocked. So we should get to a point where those figures are reasonable, they allow for growth. Because ultimately, what do you need communication for outside of the social elements that it's used for? It's really a service delivery channel that allows for us to work. Your listeners were irate at the fact that they lost their ability to make money because the network was down. So the cost of doing business is something we're very, very conscious about, that we must at all times try and bring it to within a reasonable level that encourages growth and consumption.
No, yes, of course. I mean, you're right. You talk about data and internet, and I suppose it ties in that even though you have these fees and the charges and so forth, I mean, at the end of the day, the money that's coming into POTRAZ or into government's coffers is now being turned around and used in terms of the ICT fund and the universal fund and so on, which in terms of bettering internet or ICT backbone in the country.
Yeah, it is. Well, essentially what we try and do when you look at the Innovation Fund, then you look at the Universal Services Fund, one of our core responsibilities is to service disadvantaged, marginalized areas. So you'll find that in the back of Beyond, where the operators themselves don't want to go and put communications towers for purposes of ensuring that communications exist, POTRAZ through the Universal Services Fund will go there and will put base stations, which base stations are an investment on behalf of the government and the people of Zimbabwe for our people to use. We're essentially saying, yes, a business will always look at where it can make money, and its core nucleus will be centered around that. But our mandate through our fees is to say, yes, where money may not be made, there is still a basic right and a basic expectation that you must be able to communicate. And we'll go there.
I see.
And we go there.
So POTRAZ fills that gap between business sense, if I can say that. I will put I put this base station there to make money.
Yes.
Whereas your I suppose your goal is to put a base station there
universal service,
so that people can actually access the services and the technology.
That's why it's called the Universal Services Fund. Universal access. We want everybody to have access. I'll tell you a story, Andy.
Yeah, please.
In one of the centers in Mutare, or in Manicaland, we went there quite recently with all the operators. They are tobacco growers. So the minute a base station was actually put there, by virtue of the fact that they have so many small-scale tobacco farmers, they began to use their phones. So the telcos that had initially assumed that they would not make money because this was a rural area were pleasantly surprised at the usage that was actually being generated. So there's also a misconception that the deeper you go into rural Zimbabwe, there's no money to be made. Whereas in essence, there are some areas where there is actually quite a lot of money that flows, and if you strategically position yourself, you have the ability to do well.
I mean, that brings you back to another question. I mean, I know there was a drive, particularly by the minister, to say that networks should start using each other's infrastructure.
Yes,
instead of
infrastructure sharing.
Infrastructure sharing. So
yes,
you're putting up base stations, which effectively we or the government is paying for.
Yes.
And then they are utilizing those same base stations for a fee.
Yes.
Okay, so, but obviously that putting 4 different companies putting up their own individual infrastructure, apart from the fact it's highly costly, it just doesn't work. So what are the steps towards making sure that they start integrating this infrastructure?
I think there's been resistance by 1 or 2 players. But the general idea is that it's not some deep-seated political agenda that is being drawn for the purposes of fixing. It's simply to say, if, for example, a base station is $600,000, and all 3 of you go and take $600,000, take it outside of Zimbabwe to bring 1 tower. Why don't we take $800,000, put up 1 tower, and you all put your equipment there and use it? The country actually benefits because what have we essentially done? We've saved the country $1 million in foreign currency that was going to go out anyway.
Right.
So, and what is it that you want to do as an operator? What you want is for people to access your service. They still continue to access your service because your devices and gadgets are on that tower. If you look at it from a fiber perspective, why do you need to dig 3-4 ducts in an area? Dig 1 duct.
Right.
You should all use the duct.
So what is okay, you've just explained this very well. So what is the reasoning that this is met with such resistance?
Well, I think sometimes there's always a general belief that anything that is government or government linked, there must be some sinister motive behind it. Whereas it's actually a very well thought out idea that says, let's save money on behalf of the country. And essentially, if you look at the total investment that has gone into the telco sector, it runs into billions of dollars.
Yes, it does. It's an expensive business. It's
a very expensive business. And let's streamline and marginalize that. One of the single largest sources of foreign currency has been the telcos. And if you actually say, and this is for purposes of argument, we save X amount, what have we done? We've allowed it to go into other sectors that will actually benefit from the growth and use of money that is being generated locally.
Right. No, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
If I can call it that. And
absolutely.
So I think the quicker that happens and we get on top of
when
that.
We're encouraging it.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, let's take a question here. Right, this is an interesting one. These guys are all talk. After all, regulators who are blinded by the fantasy of raking in more tax. creating a Silicon Valley of what sort Zim doesn't even have savers or the proper infrastructure. How can we create amazing applications with such hostile environment? And also, profits of applications take time. Only recently did Facebook start making profits. Application work uses frenemies. It's like it's free for some period and later it grows value. WhatsApp is not yet making profits. So these guys picked up the 6 applications based on the possibility of making money. Now, it's interesting because you can see the listener, his point of view.
He's had a bad day, but let's help him.
Okay, please do. Yes, please answer that.
Yeah, let's help him. I think that as Zimbabweans, we need to move away from this negative stereotype that we can't do anything positive. Number one. Number two, we have a general pull me down syndrome that says, no, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it. 30 years ago, China, and I say this with all due respect, was a backwater.
Yes.
It was a backwater.
30, 50 years it took.
Yes, 30 years ago. In the last 20 years, it's gotten to a point where it sustains global trade throughout the world. And we're saying as Zimbabweans, we have the ability to do amazing things. And what we need to do is, number one, believe in ourselves. Number two, create a platform. And number three, begin to do. There's a lot of talking that occurs. And we're just not talking. We're actually saying, this is what we're going to do. Do you want to participate? Participate. The choice of whether you do it or not then becomes yours.
Right.
You could simply sit at your house and moan about everything that has gone wrong and will go wrong. That won't change tomorrow. Tomorrow is only changed when you begin to do and you begin to be a participant.
Right.
So for those that have met our criteria and are saying we're buying into this, we wish them all the best. And we're encouraged by the fact that we actually believe they're going to do very, very well.
I mean, the point is here is that don't let your environment stop you doing something. Otherwise, you're right. You'll just sit talking about doing something and never do it. So do it. And even in bad environments, money can be made. Correct?
The irony of all this is that, and I say this a lot whenever I have an opportunity to speak, how many people want to die? Very, very few people. Everybody has this hope that something good is going to happen. So if the particular individual who has written to you begins to believe that something good is going to happen, number one, it improves your mood. Number two, you begin to feel better. And number three, you actually begin to do something.
Right.
So we're waiting for him to come and apply and we'll fund him.
Exactly. Have an idea, come and fund him. Right. Well, if it meets your criteria,
absolutely.
Of course.
If it meets our criteria.
Okay, here's the question. Mr. Bvute, so if you put base stations in marginalized areas, then who benefits and whose network do they use? On the issue of sharing infrastructure, we know this, government, and it can have sinister motives.
No, government and the regulator in this particular instance has absolutely no sinister motive other than the mathematical facts that I've presented, that 3 people can't invest in the same thing. One entity can invest X amount, and that X amount will benefit everybody else. When you look at marginalized areas, I take it the listener is speaking from an advantaged position of being in a place where they can actually send this message to you on WhatsApp. There are dark places in Zimbabwe where network is non-existent, where you cannot communicate, you cannot make a telephone call, and people have not heard of the internet. And the general idea is, by virtue of the fact that they have this privilege that they are currently using, let's enable and allow others who are Zimbabwean to enjoy it as well. And I assume that's our mandate. And we'll do that.
Go for that mandate, yeah, please.
Absolutely.
And I assume if you put up a base station, everyone can use it as long as they pay a fee.
Yes, and it's very, very simple. They pay a basic fee for use of the infrastructure, and then they begin to actually build and use it. And people use that infrastructure. We have a program right now, and where government wants to roll out through the Universal Services Fund 600 base stations throughout Zimbabwe in areas where they don't have. And I've been to places in Zimbabwe where we've gone and I've tried to use my phone, and I've been so frustrated because, we're all hooked and addicted to our phones.
I even had to drive once, I think 10, 15 kilometers somewhere just to get a signal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And with where we're going, where everything is technology based, where you need a POS machine in order to transact, where you need to communicate, where in order for you to send letters, you use your email, it's important that the country is enabled. And what we want to do is to enable the country. And who benefits when the country is enabled? You, the citizen.
We do, and also the economy.
The economy does well.
Because obviously that allows you to do business remotely. You don't have to be coming to Harare to do certain things, etc., etc.
The irony is that now there are aeroplanes that you can actually use your phone. You can use Wi-Fi as you travel. So if it can be done in the air, surely we can make sure that rural Rwanda has the ability to just make a basic call.
And I suppose the worst thing is that the plane flies over there and it can use it in the sky, but the people on the ground don't actually have it. And this is what, of course, the new 600 base stations will do.
They'll do that.
All right, now I want to move on to something which is very close to my heart, and this is about internet safety, awareness, particularly for children. I mean, President Mnangagwa said, in the same vein, we must always be alert to the need to protect the young and vulnerable from the vices associated with ICTs and the threat of cyber crimes. Now, this is critical. And what is POTRAZ view, or what are you doing about this sort of issue in terms of internet safety in particular?
Okay, a few months ago, our parent ministry was co-joined, and it now has the cyber security mandate, which POTRAZ has been working on with the ministry to try and establish. And the general joke was that cybersecurity meant that one became the minister of WhatsApp, because that was the general assumption. But it's not just about that. Yeah. It's about the ability to use devices to a point where you are safe when you use them. And that safety involves and implies that when you use your internet banking, you must have a certain level of confidence that your money is safe as you do that. When your children are on the internet, we must be able to develop policies that allow for trolls to not be able to access your children. We must be able to allow for applications that block and that actually ensure that there is responsible use of the internet. And so the ministry and POTRAZ are working together to try and ensure that we try and align ourselves for all intensive purposes with that reality.
I mean, even now we're talking about fake news, for example.
Absolutely. There's this new phenomena where you have people who can't seem to stop insulting via use of social media and Twitter. They just write. Because before, speaking was supposedly free. You could say whatever you want to say. Now people have devices that they have the ability to just write and say whatever they want to say without recourse. Now, and we're working to regulate that.
Now, so are there laws in place? Do the police have the powers to be able to do something about this? Or, because in some countries it's almost impossible to get these trolls.
The basic law that exists through the Post and Telecommunications Act is that you should not be abused using a device. So you can actually go and report to the police, and the police will be able to act on it. What we are now working on is the General Cybersecurity Bill, which enables for us to regulate things like fake news, the insulting of people using media that is not proper. In Germany, and that's a test case, and we're looking at that, is that if you insult a person using media, you can be fined a substantial sum of money. And we're getting to align our laws to be able to do that. So I think in the next year or so, you should now be able to see cybersecurity being a reality that protects.
Well, hopefully we're going to get the minister in to talk about that, because, of course, I think he's been called the cyber policeman or something. You want to shut down WhatsApp so that government can control what we say. But anyway, I'm sure he can answer those questions.
Not at all.
But I think this issue of internet safety, particularly for children and even for adults, is critical. And I think that it's also the onus on the parents to make sure that they monitor their child's activities on the internet and so on.
They should.
And if they do see this, they need to either contact the nearest police station, report it, and also Childline Zimbabwe.
Yes,
I understand. Childline Zimbabwe has got a free helpline on 116. Is that correct?
Yes. They should do that.
Okay.
And I think, as I said, we are working to ensure that we align our laws to a point where they get to actually ensuring that we protect our citizens from things like that. And I think we're not too far away from it.
Okay. Now, I will say as well that you said this earlier, that you are one of the few parastatals that actually had an AGM. I mean, I believe that you said it was you wanted the people to expect more accountability and transparency.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, when you say an AGM, government is your major shareholder, I assume, correct?
And
so this is more for what the public to understand what POTRAZ does and to see the numbers and figures that you have.
Well, I think at an AGM we report on our activities for the year. We present our statement. We present our statement of accounts, and the shareholder, whose government is present at all times, represented by the Ministry of ICT and the Ministry of Finance and the Auditor General. And the general idea is to report back on what we've done and to say, this is what we've used your money. This is how we've used your money. Are you in agreement with what we've done, and we would like to present to you what we've done? And I think it's an open AGM that we would like to continue to do on a year-by-year basis, that actually gives confidence that the levies that we get are used properly. There's a basic misconception that you can go to POTRAZ and you can take money. It's not true. There are very high accounting standards, number one.
Good corporate governance issues as well.
Corporate governance. And the budget, to pass the budget that actually runs POTRAZ is an onerous process. And for people to then be able to use that money requires significant sign-off. And we're simply saying every year we'll report back on what we've done as a public entity so that you may have confidence that we're doing the right thing with that money.
Right. Now, one thing as well I noticed from the AGM, from part of the statement, and we will talk a little bit about some of the numbers just now, but your future plans in terms of what you would like to do as a regulator. And this covered issues such as community information centers, national broadband plan, aggressive consumer awareness and education, Towers project, ICT innovation, schools computerization, telemedicine. Now, these are very ambitious and I would say noble plans. How are you rolling those out? What do you see as the vision in terms of the future?
With telemedicine, we got a grant from the ITU to start it off. And what is telemedicine? It is essentially the ability of a district hospital to be able to refer to a major referral hospital and get direction on an issue or a case. Because sometimes the nature of the cases that they deal with, the district hospital has an inability to move them forward. So rather than come all the way to Harare, to Bulawayo,
or to send the patient to Harare.
Yes. You, via modern forms of communication, you have the ability to refer, to ask, to be guided, and to help. Everything that you've actually said there, Andy, implies a general idea of things that are actually in motion. We were very proud of the fact that we've renovated just under 180 post offices, run down post offices throughout Zimbabwe, and we've converted them into community information centers. And what is a community information center? For all intensive purposes, it's an internet cafe. And we take it for granted because we have access to internet, that there are places and people who don't have access to it, who don't have the ability to go and use a computer, surf, get information and move forward. And what we've done is we've taken them throughout Zimbabwe and said, here's a desktop, here's a center, for next to nothing. Your government would like you to be able to join the super information highway, use it. And what do people do? There are people, we went to Bindura and one old man was looking at it and he was trying to import a car from Japan. So the ability to expose people enables them to use, it enables them to grow. And we would like to facilitate the growth of the economy through people interacting.
I think you made a very good point, because I think when people look at POTRAZ, they seem to just think mobile network operators.
No.
But actually, you're more than that. You cover internet, you cover postal services,
yes.
You cover satellite, you cover private networks like banks and so on.
Yes.
This is correct.
Yes.
And that's where the regulator comes in. It isn't just mobile networks. This is looking at the broader picture of Zimbabwe and the telecommunications and postal structure inside it.
You should get a job there. You fully understand it.
I'm not sure my current employer would like that, but thank you very much for the offer. Now let's talk about the Universal Services Fund, because you did talk about it. And there's one figure that didn't quite jibe with me, because you said budgeted revenue was 10.8 million, but you got actual revenue of 11.5, but you only spent 459,000. Okay. Now that seems to imply that your goal of setting up base stations and so forth, it implies that pretty much for the first 7 months you didn't really do very much with that Universal Fund. Is that a good implication?
We are a responsible user of money, and one of our basic beliefs is that the fund must always have reserves. And reserves enable us to plan into the future. But more importantly, our approval process of some of the projects that we've put in place is lengthy because of the governance structure that is there. So there is some bureaucracy that exists, but it's good bureaucracy that is meant to protect the fund. So if we say tomorrow we want to go to Mvurwe, we might not be able to go to Mvurwe tomorrow. It might take us 60 days to get to Mvurwe, trying to get all the approvals, but we'll get to Mvurwe.
Okay. Would you have an idea how much you've actually spent in terms of this fund and what you've done? Would you have any idea on that?
Well, I think let me put it like this. We responsibly use the money that we have, and the fund is healthy.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, Ozias, I think on that level, I think on that note, we should end it there. I really would like to thank you for coming. I know that you're one who likes to chairman effectively rather than come and talk in public. So thank you for coming on Business Unusual. Really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, for cajoling me and twisting me into coming. I've thoroughly enjoyed the interview, Andy, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. So, to end the program, I'd just like to quote our president, Mnangagwa. Yes. He said, ICT must be viewed as an economic enabler for the development and establishment of sector-appropriate solutions with comprehensive breadth, depth, flexibility, and applicability. The ICT policy will go a long way towards making information technology revolution the basis for ultimately transforming Zimbabwe into an e-society. Let us all in our image, actions, and service culture reflect that it is a new era, and Zimbabwe is open for business.
Our leader has given us guidance, and that's exactly where we're going.
Something to think about. Good night,
and
you all be safe.